Welcome to Book Summary Podcast, your gateway to personal transformation. Each episode delivers big ideas from the world's most impactful books on mindset, productivity, and success, all in just a few minutes. Ready to turn knowledge into action? Let's get started.
Welcome to this deep dive. We are thrilled to have you with us today because we are looking at a stack of research that, frankly, completely dismantled my entire understanding of success.
It really does flip the script on what a legacy actually means.
Yeah, it really does. And what it actually takes to build something that outlasts you. I want to start by dropping you into a very specific, highly charged moment in time. Just picture a 4-year-old boy.
Okay.
He's standing in the hallway of his childhood home, completely out of sight, and he overhears his mother in the next room. And she is in a state of absolute visceral terror.
Wow.
She's talking to his father, and she's practically haunted, explaining her deep, paralyzing fears about money.
It's a striking image, especially because as a 4-year-old, you don't really understand currency or economics at all.
Right, you don't know what a mortgage is.
Exactly. You just understand your mother's emotional baseline.
Yeah.
If she is terrified, your world is fundamentally unsafe.
And her panic wasn't some sudden irrational anxiety disorder. She had lived it. Her wealthy family had lost absolutely everything during the Great Depression.
They lost it all.
Every dime. We're talking about a girl who had grown up in significant affluence. Her grandfather was this highly successful industrialist and inventor, an immigrant who came over and built a massive, sprawling fortune from scratch. And then the crash happened.
The 1929 crash.
Yeah. She came home from school one day to find a for sale sign aggressively hammered into the front lawn of her childhood home. The fortune had just vanished into thin air.
Which is just a complete psychological gut punch.
And her mother, who only had a high school education and had been heavily cosseted and protected her entire life, suddenly had to go out and get a job as a hospital receptionist. She worked that desk for 50 years just to keep the lights on.
That kind of systemic shock rewires a person. I mean, the sheer trauma of a legacy evaporating overnight, of going from generational wealth to living paycheck to paycheck, it leaves a permanent psychological mark.
A mark that you pass down.
Inevitably. You inevitably pass that anxiety down to your children.
So the mother was terrified of a very specific, very famous proverb. You've probably heard a version of it. Shirtsleeves to shirtsleeves in 3 generations.
Right, a classic.
The idea that the first generation works in their shirt sleeves and makes the money, the second generation goes to college and spends it, and by the third generation, the grandkids are back to working in their shirt sleeves.
It's a terrifying thought if you've built something.
Now, I want you to fast forward decades later. That terrified 4-year-old boy listening in the hallway grows up. He becomes a lawyer. In 1974, he gets summoned halfway across the world by a wildly successful Singaporean businessman.
Total shift in scenery.
Completely.
Yeah.
They sit in this high-rise office, drink tea, and finally the businessman leans forward and says, "You are probably wondering why I invited you here. We Chinese have a proverb, rice paddy to rice paddy in 3 generations.
Oh.
He says, "I don't want that to happen to my family. Can you help us?"
That moment in Singapore must have felt like a massive psychological puzzle piece snapping into place for him.
Oh, absolutely.
Hearing the exact same generational anxiety he heard from his mother in the United States, but articulated by a businessman in Asia, it highlights that the entropy of wealth, the inevitable decay of a family's success over a few generations, is a culturally universal phenomenon.
It's everywhere.
It's not an American problem or an Asian problem. It captures a fundamental flaw in human behavior and how we handle surplus resources.
And the lawyer in that story was James E. Hughes, Jr. That lifelong journey to answer the Singaporean businessman's question led to the framework we are exploring today. We are pulling heavily from the research and concepts in the source material, which is Complete Family Wealth.
A truly foundational text for this topic.
Our mission for this deep dive is to completely unpack their framework. We are looking at how the world's most enduringly successful families actually manage to avoid this shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves curse. And spoiler alert, they do it by redefining the concept of wealth entirely.
They completely flip it on its head.
They move away from the idea of just financial capital and focus on wealth as well-being.
That distinction is the engine driving this entire conversation. Whether you are grinding away trying to build a startup right now, or you are thinking about how to set up your own kids for the future, or you are just fiercely curious about the hidden psychology of the ultra-wealthy, This is going to be a total paradigm shift.
It really is.
It forces you to look in the mirror and ask, what does it actually mean to leave a legacy? Because if your operational definition of legacy is just leaving behind a massive pile of money, the source material argues that you are already on the accelerated path to losing every single dime of it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we need to address the biggest misconception right out of the gate. When you hear families talk about keeping it in the family or protecting the family wealth, almost everyone assumes the it is the cash, the stocks, the real estate.
Of course.
But this framework throws that entire assumption in the trash. Financial wealth is only 1/5 of true wealth. True wealth, according to the research, is comprised of 5 distinct qualitative capitals.
5, not just 1.
Right. And the financial capital is merely the administrative tool that supports the other 4.
Let's actually break down those 5 qualitative capitals because they are the actual soil in which a family's future either grows or dies. The first one is human capital.
Which is not human resources.
Exactly. I want to be clear here. This isn't about human resources in a cold corporate sense. This is about the physical and emotional well-being of the individual human beings in your family tree. Are they physically healthy?
Are they emotionally resilient?
Right. Do they have a positive sense of identity and meaning in their lives? You could have $1 billion in the bank, but if your family members are struggling with severe untreated addiction or profound depression or an absolute lack of purpose, your human capital is bankrupt.
It's totally gone.
And if the individuals are broken, the family system is broken.
That makes total sense. You can't build a durable house with rotting wood.
Great way to put it.
The second one they outline is legacy capital. I like to think of this as the family's internal brand. What are the core values? What is the shared purpose? Think about the stories a family tells around the Thanksgiving table.
All the stories are so important.
Are the stories about how Grandpa was a cutthroat businessman who crushed his enemies? Or are the stories about how the family always steps up during a crisis? Those stories create a distinct shared identity. If you don't have legacy capital, you just have a group of strangers who happen to share a last name and a bank account.
Following that is family relationship capital. This is entirely centered on the mechanics of communication.
How they actually talk to each other.
Yes. Can the family engage in healthy conflict? Do they have the ability to support strong interpersonal connections across multiple generations? Let's say you have an aunt and a niece who fundamentally disagree on how a charitable donation should be spent.
Which happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Relationship capital is what allows them to sit in a room, hear each other out, and reach a consensus without fracturing the family permanently. If your family tree is full of people who haven't spoken to each other in 10 years because of petty slights, your relationship capital is 0.
You cannot build a multi-generational enterprise if you can't even talk to each other.
Precisely.
And then we get to the fourth one, which sounds a bit intimidating. Structural capital. When families build significant wealth or complex businesses, they inevitably end up dealing with the spider web of legal entities. You've got trusts, LLCs, limited partnerships, family offices, governance boards.
It becomes a full-time job just reading the org chart.
Structural capital is the family's actual ability to navigate and understand that system effectively. I imagine a lot of families get completely crushed by their own architecture.
They absolutely do. You
Yeah.
see second or third generation family members who have no idea how their own trusts work. They are terrified of their lawyers. They don't understand the tax implications of their own assets. High structural capital means the family understands the machinery they have built rather than being a hostage to it.
Which brings us to the final one.
Right. And finally, the 5th is social capital. This looks outward. It is the family's commitment to the communities beyond their own front door. It is the strength, the grounding, and the perspective that comes from serving something greater than just the family unit.
So we're talking volunteering, philanthropy, civic engagement.
Exactly. It prevents the family from becoming an isolated, paranoid fortress.
Sitting beneath all of those 5 qualitative capitals is the financial capital. The property, the cash, the securities, the business revenue. But the authors make it undeniably clear the focus must be the qualitative capital.
The qualitative has to be the driver.
The financial capital is just the fertilizer. It pays for the therapy that builds the human capital. It pays for the family retreats that build the relationship capital. It pays the legal fees to structure things correctly. But if you just hoard the fertilizer without planting any seeds, you just end up with a pile of dirt.
What's fascinating here is the glaring discrepancy in how wealthy families actually allocate their resources across these categories. Think about a standard high net worth family. They have a massive, meticulously tracked budget for financial operating expenses.
Right, asset management fees, lawyers.
They eagerly pay 1 or 2% in asset management fees. They pay hundreds of thousands in legal and accounting fees. They review their financial balance sheet quarterly, sometimes monthly. They optimize every single basis point of their stock portfolio.
They track everything.
Everything. But if you ask them, what is your annual budget for proactively investing in your family's relationship capital? They look at you blankly.
I would bet the number is usually 0. Or maybe they count a chaotic week-long family vacation to Hawaii as their relationship investment, but there is no strategy behind it.
That is the core vulnerability. They rarely have a family balance sheet to measure whether their human or relationship capital went up or down this year. The source material argues that any family that strictly maintains its financial value while ignoring the purposeful growth of its qualitative capital has already entered a state of entropy.
They are decaying from the inside out.
It's a mathematical certainty that you cannot sustain a 100-year family enterprise if you are entirely ignoring 4/5 your actual capital base.
There is a quote in the text from a family leader reflecting on what her grandmother used to tell her, and it perfectly encapsulates this entire paradigm. The grandmother would say, "Our family has always been rich, and we've sometimes had money."
That is so profound.
I had to stop and reread that line 3 times. Being rich is having the human, legacy, relationship, structural, and social capital intact. You have your health, you have your shared values, you have a community. Having money is just the quantitative, numerical side of things, and that can fluctuate wildly. You can lose a fortune in a market crash, but if you are rich in those qualitative capitals, you will survive it.
Framing it that way fundamentally alters your time horizon. When your primary focus is purely financial, you are constantly planning for the next quarter, the next fiscal year, or maybe the next tax cycle. But preserving true qualitative richness requires an incredibly elongated perspective. You are suddenly forced to plan for generations of people you will never even meet.
Which brings up a metaphor from the text that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. It's the story of the copper beech tree.
I love this story.
To truly grasp the immense time horizon required for this kind of complete family wealth, we are talking a 100 to 150-year plan, the authors share an anecdote about Marshal Lyautey. He was a 19th century French general, and he retired to an estate in France. He was known for having the most magnificent, meticulously planned garden in the entire country. One day, he is walking the grounds with his head gardener, inspecting the layout, and he realizes something is missing. He turns to the gardener and says, "I see no copper beech tree. We must plant one."
Right.
The gardener looks at him, probably thinking the general is crazy, and says, "But, mon général, such a tree takes 150 years to grow to maturity."
The general's response is the thesis of long-term thinking. He looks back at the gardener and says, "Then we must plant today. We have no time to waste."
It gives you chills. We have no time to waste. Just think about the sheer psychological courage it takes to plant a sapling, fully knowing you will be dead before it provides any real shade.
You will never see it.
You are never going to see the mature tree. You just have to trust that you are preparing the soil correctly, and you have to accept that your great-grandchildren will be the ones who enjoy the canopy. To embark on this journey of complete family wealth is essentially a profound act of faith in the future.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to grow a 150-year tree, you have to be intimately familiar with the soil it is growing in. You can't just dig a hole and hope for the best.
Right.
In this framework, that soil is called the family enterprise. But before we can even talk about managing the enterprise, we have to look at how the sources redefine the word family itself. Because the traditional definition is actually a massive hindrance to long-term survival.
Right. The research demands a major shift in how we categorize who belongs in the inner circle. The definition of family has to shift from a strict reliance on blood to a reliance on affinity.
Affinity is the key word.
If you look at families that actually flourish over a century, they do not limit their identity to genetic lineage. A family of affinity acts more like a thriving community. It actively includes spouses, in-laws, adopted members, trusted long-term advisors, mentors, and close friends who are linked by a common mission.
Their absolute first priority is inclusion.
If someone shares your values and contributes to your qualitative capital, they are family, period.
Embracing that inclusive definition sets the stage for a vital conceptual tool introduced in the text: It's called the three-circle model. This was developed by Renato Tagiri and John Davis at Harvard Business School, and it is the best way to diagnose the health of a family enterprise.
So how does it work visually?
If you are listening to this, I want you to visualize a classic Venn diagram with three overlapping circles. The first circle is the family. As we just discussed, the priority in this circle is inclusion, nurturing, and emotional support. It operates on unconditional acceptance.
Okay, unconditional acceptance.
The second circle is the owners. The priority here is totally different. It is about preservation, managing financial risk, and taking legal responsibility for the assets. It operates on strategy and return on investment.
Very structured.
Yes. And the third circle is the managers. These are the people actually running the day-to-day operations of the family business or the investment portfolio. Their priority is performance, efficiency, and execution. It operates on meritocracy.
Visualizing those three circles overlap is incredibly helpful, but the text points out that this is also where almost all the drama happens.
A massive drama.
Conflict explodes when people ignore the differing rules of each circle, or worse, when one circle balloons in size and completely suffocates the other two. Let's actually walk through what that looks like in practice. Let's invent a hypothetical family business. We'll call it the Reynolds Family Bakery.
A massive commercial baking empire.
Exactly. What happens if the management circle dominates everything else?
If the management circle dominates the Reynolds Family Bakery, the entire family culture becomes obsessed with performance and operational efficiency. That sounds great for a business, but it is toxic for a family.
Give me an example.
Let's say you have a cousin, Jimmy. Jimmy is a Reynolds, but he is a terrible baker, and he has no head for logistics. In a management-dominated culture, Jimmy is viewed as useless. He gets pushed to the margins. He isn't invited to the important dinners because he isn't contributing to the bottom line.
So unprofessional family members are kept at arm's length.
Yes. Eventually, the family members feel entirely alienated from their own enterprise. They realize their worth is only measured by their corporate utility, not their human value.
So the family circle shrinks and resentment builds. Okay, let's flip it. What if the ownership circle dominates the Reynolds Bakery?
When ownership dominates, the obsessive focus becomes preserving the assets, hoarding the shares, minimizing taxes, and shielding the wealth from outsiders. The current owners, maybe the three eldest siblings, hold on to the equity with a death grip.
They won't let go.
They refuse to pass shares to the younger generation because they view them as a risk. They exclude spouses from any financial conversations. The family circle shrinks drastically because the definition of who matters is restricted to who holds the legal voting rights.
I can see how that leads to what the authors call passive ownership. If you are a 30-year-old Reynolds family member, but the elders refuse to give you any real insight or stake in the bakery, you just check out. You become a passive beneficiary.
And the text notes that passive ownership breeds two incredibly toxic cultures simultaneously. First, you get paternalism from the senior owners. They pat you on the head and say, "Don't worry your pretty little head about the bakery. Just cash your dividend check. Let us take care of you."
And that paternalism inevitably breeds the second toxic culture, which is severe resentment. Because 10 years later, when the bakery hits a rough patch and the dividend checks stop, those passive family members are furious. They have no idea how the business works. They feel completely helpless. And the senior owners turn around and say, "Why aren't you helping?
You should have known better.
You should have been paying attention." It's a completely dysfunctional loop.
How do you break that loop? The remedy is active ownership. And to be clear, active ownership doesn't mean cousin Jimmy has to suddenly become the CEO of the bakery. It means taking real, engaged responsibility for the enterprise.
So what does that look like?
It means attending the annual meetings, understanding the broader risk profile, asking intelligent questions, and maintaining a strategic beginner's mind. You have to separate the roles in your head. You have to understand that ownership is a broad responsibility, whereas day-to-day management is a specific calling.
Not everyone is called to manage.
Exactly. But everyone who benefits must take responsibility for ownership.
So as you're listening to this, try to audit your own life. Visualize your own family, your business, or even your close friend group. Which circle is the biggest right now? Is the daily grind of management dwarfing everything else? Are you so obsessed with preserving ownership that you are alienating people?
It's a tough audit to do.
But the ultimate goal for long-term flourishing, if you want to successfully grow that 150-year copper beech tree, is to actively work to make the family circle the largest of the three. Because the family circle is the only place where communication, identity, and qualitative capital actually reside.
Growing that family circle, inevitably brings us face to face with the single most dangerous bottleneck any family enterprise will ever navigate, the transition of power, wealth, and identity to the younger members.
This is where the psychology gets so fascinating. We are talking about the next generation. But wait, the authors actually give us a strict rule about vocabulary here. We are expressly instructed not to call them the next generation.
Language shapes reality. When you constantly refer to the younger members as the next generation, you are implicitly telling them that they are just waiting in line. They're waiting for the important people to die so they can step up.
It's very passive.
Extremely passive. It places all the narrative weight, all the glory on the wealth creators who came first. The text urges us to reframe this completely and call them the rising generation.
The rising generation.
Yes. The word rising honors their active capacity to grow, to forge their own unique paths, and to bring their own fresh promise to the family's future. And it's not strictly tied to age. You can be 45 or 50 years old and still be a vital part of the rising generation if you are currently in the process of establishing your own leadership and identity.
The hurdle they face in trying to rise is perfectly captured by this terrifying metaphor in the text, the black hole. Imagine the founder of the wealth, the patriarch or matriarch who built the empire from scratch. Psychologically, they operate like a massive sun.
A giant star.
They provide all the light, all the warmth, all the resources, and all the gravity to the entire family system. But if that founder doesn't intentionally manage their presence, their gravity becomes so incredibly strong that it turns into a black hole.
It just sucks everything in.
Succeeding generations literally shrink into insignificance because they get trapped in the inescapable orbit of the founder's legacy. If your last name is synonymous with a massive global corporation, how do you escape the gravity of that black hole to figure out who you actually are?
It is an incredibly difficult psychological physics problem. And the gravitational pull of that black hole creates very specific, identifiable personas among the rising generation. The authors have categorized these archetypes, and they are unnervingly accurate.
Let's walk through them.
First, you have the dutiful steward. On paper, stewardship sounds like a noble goal. But the dutiful steward is entirely consumed by living someone else's dream.
Like a kid who wants to do their own thing but can't.
Imagine a kid who desperately wanted to be a marine biologist. But the gravitational pull of the family real estate empire was too strong, so they surrendered and became the VP of sales. They spend their entire life asking a quiet, agonizing question. If my only purpose on earth is to be a steward of my grandfather's legacy, who am I?
That sounds like a quiet tragedy. Then you have an archetype called the meteor. This is the person who is just living a normal life, and then suddenly they're struck by the realization of massive wealth.
It's just out of nowhere.
Maybe they accidentally open a piece of mail from a trust attorney, or a friend points out their family's net worth on Forbes. The sheer impact of that realization knocks them completely off their life's trajectory. They freeze up, wondering what the point of studying for a chemistry exam is if they already have $10 million in a trust fund. The wealth paralyzes their ambition.
A parallel to that is the archetype known as froggy. This is based on the proverbial frog in the slowly heating pot of water. Froggy is slowly cooked in the absolute, frictionless comfort of a luxurious life.
They're just too comfortable.
They might have a nagging desire to jump out of the pot to go start their own business or move to a new city, but they are terrified. They look at the cold, harsh reality outside the pot, and they look at their first-class flights and paid-off penthouse. And they just stay in the water until their ambition boils away.
The one that really got to me was the parallel universe. This happens when parents recognize the danger of the black hole, and in a misguided attempt to protect their kids from it, they raise them in fake poverty.
Oh, this one is brutal.
They live in a modest house, they force the kids to shop at thrift stores, they constantly talk about how tight money is, despite having $50 million in liquid assets. When those kids inevitably turn 18 and find out the truth, the psychological fallout is catastrophic.
The betrayal is profound.
They feel utterly betrayed. They wonder, if you lied to me about this fundamental reality of our lives, what else in my life is a lie? The trust is permanently broken.
You also frequently see the anxious heir. This is the individual who is constantly paralyzed by imposter syndrome. They are terrified that they will never ever measure up to the larger-than-life founder. They feel that anything they accomplish will just be attributed to their last name, not their talent.
And then there's the last one.
And finally, there is the grand giver. This person tries to violently blast themselves out of the black hole's orbit by openly repudiating the wealth. They might give it all away to charity or refuse their inheritance entirely. in a desperate, flailing bid to prove they have their own identity. While philanthropy is good, doing it from a place of rebellion often causes massive, bitter family rifts.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because if you look at all those archetypes, Froggy, the meteor, the anxious heir, they all suffer from the same core disease. They feel entitled or they feel paralyzed.
Yes.
But the expert psychological solution presented in the research isn't to take the money away or to force them to sign a spreadsheet or to trap them in a rigid trust document. The actual antidote to the black hole is a psychological process called individuation.
Individuation is the lifelong developmental task of establishing your own unique identity, completely separate from your parents, separate from the legendary founder, and separate from the family wealth.
It's separating yourself.
Exactly. The text makes a profound redefinition here. We often look at trust fund kids behaving badly and call it entitlement. But entitlement is fundamentally misunderstood. True entitlement is actually a failure of individuation.
How so?
It is a failure to see oneself as a capable, independent human being who can affect the world through their own competence. An entitled person relies on the family wealth because they have zero confidence in their own internal resources.
To really drive this home, the authors lean on the work of psychologist Erik Erikson and his stages of psychosocial development. Erikson mapped out the conflicts we all have to resolve as we age. As an infant, you wrestle with trust versus mistrust. As a teenager, the massive battle is identity versus role confusion. Who am I outside of my parents' house?
And as an older adult, it's integrity versus despair. Did my life mean anything?
Individuation isn't a one-time event you complete at age 18. It spans across all these stages. It's the continuous act of maintaining a mature, loving connection with your family while successfully fighting these developmental battles on your own 2 feet.
The danger of massive financial capital is that it can actively short-circuit these developmental stages. A teenager is supposed to experience the friction of a part-time job to learn responsibility. If the family wealth smooths over that friction, if they just give the teenager a platinum card instead of making them work at a coffee shop, the teenager never resolves that stage of development. They remain stunted.
They never hit that resistance.
To actively combat this stunting, the authors suggest that individuals in the rising generation must actively seek out the 4 C's to forge their own path. First, they need control.
Like control of the trust.
Not control over the family fortune, but self-efficacy. They need to find a domain in life, whether it's writing code, climbing mountains, or teaching, where their actions directly dictate the outcome. Second, they need commitment. They need a positive dedication to a goal that is hard to achieve. Wealth makes it incredibly easy to quit things when they get boring. Commitment is the muscle that fights that urge.
Third is challenge. They have to actively test their abilities. If your life has no economic necessity pushing you, you have to artificially manufacture rigorous challenges. You have to push yourself to the brink of failure just to prove to yourself that you can survive it.
And fourth is community. They need a deep connection with others outside the family bubble. They need friends who don't care about their last name, who value them for their humor, their loyalty, or their work ethic.
Finding those 4 C's is the escape velocity required to break out of the black hole. But there is a specific, highly volatile moment in this journey that can derail everything. It is the moment that the rising generation is formally brought into the financial fold. The infamous big reveal.
Oh, the big reveal. The way parents and wealth advisors agonize over this moment is legendary. We all have the stereotypical cinematic scene in our heads.
Right, the lawyer's office.
A 21-year-old kid is ushered into a downtown mahogany-paneled lawyer's office. The senior attorney clears his throat, delivers a stern 10-minute lecture about the burdens of responsibility and the blessings of good fortune, and then slides a massive binder across the desk.
With the flow charts and everything.
The kid opens it, sees flow charts, complex trusts, and a bottom-line net worth number with an absurd amount of zeros. The young adult sits there, completely shell-shocked by the magnitude of it, totally unable to formulate any real questions, and eventually just stumbles out of the office in a daze.
It's a great scene for a movie, but the authors emphasize that this reality is largely a myth today. Young adults are incredibly perceptive, and more importantly, they have the internet.
They absolutely know.
They notice that they live in a zip code where houses cost $10 million. They notice that they fly private while their friends fly commercial. They can literally Google their parents' company and see the revenue. So the big reveal in the lawyer's office isn't actually a reveal of new information. It is merely a formal confirmation of what the child already suspected.
All those hushed conversations they overheard growing up, all the weird anxiety around money, It is suddenly made tangible and real.
But here's the kicker. Even if the kid fully suspected they were wealthy, that formal confirmation still hits their nervous system, like the meteor strike we discussed earlier. It induces a genuine somatic psychological shock.
A trauma response.
The recipient's brain perceives the sheer weight of this new reality as a threat, and they are plunged immediately into a classic trauma response: fight, flight, or freeze. Some go into fight mode. They get angry at the wealth, they argue with the lawyers, they want to liquidate it and give it all to radical charities just to spite the system.
Some choose flight. They physically distance themselves, moving to another country, pretending the money doesn't exist, refusing to return the wealth manager's phone calls.
And the vast majority just freeze. They do absolutely nothing. They nod, they sign the papers, and they remain paralyzed by the terrifying weight of it all.
It sounds counterintuitive to the average person. Why would receiving millions of dollars cause a trauma response? The text points out a profound psychological reality. It is often significantly harder to receive a massive gift than it is to give one or to create one.
Harder to receive.
Yes. Think about the psychology of the wealth creator. They woke up every day with a singular focus. They built the company, they fought the competitors, they navigated the recessions. They had the ultimate agency and the deep pride of creation. Economic necessity was the engine driving their life's meaning.
They had to work to survive.
The recipient, however, is robbed of that engine. They now face a terrifying, boundless freedom. They are handed a fortune, and along with it, the crushing implicit expectation to forge an excellent, meaningful life. But they have to do it without the absolute structural requirement of earning a paycheck to survive. It takes immense internal resolve to wake up at 6 a.m. to master a difficult craft when the bribes of luxury, endless vacations, and absolute softness are constantly whispering in your ear, offering you an easy way out.
So if the confirmation of wealth is a psychological meteor strike, what is the survival strategy for the recipient? The authors suggest a radical approach. They call it the pause.
The pause is one of the most powerful tools in this entire framework. When the formal confirmation happens, let's say the individual is 22 years old. The recipient should look at the money, look at the trust documents, and simply say, not yet.
Just not yet.
They establish a boundary: no joining the family foundation board, no attending quarterly investment meetings, no receiving monthly financial statements. They intentionally put their active relationship with the wealth on pause for a significant period. The author suggests up to 10 years.
10 years.
During that decade, they need to live their life largely as if the money doesn't exist in order to figure out who they actually are and to cultivate those 4 C's we talked about.
And to be clear, this isn't about living in a delusional state of denial. It's not the parallel universe fake poverty. They know the money is there, but they are refusing to let the existence of that money dictate their early adult life choices. They are buying time to individuate. The text brings up a brilliant historical story to illustrate this, pulled from St. Ignatius's spiritual exercises. Ignatius outlines a scenario involving 3 different people who each suddenly receive a massive sum of money. The first person lacks any discipline. They immediately integrate the money into their ego, squander it eagerly on every impulse and luxury they can imagine, and eventually lament the emptiness and the loss.
The second person represents the flight response. They are terrified of the money's power to corrupt them. They push it away, they hide from it, they refuse to interact with it, and they essentially flee from the responsibility.
But the third person takes the hardest path.
The third person achieves a psychological state that Ignatius calls proper indifference. They do not squander the wealth, but they also do not hide from it. They manage to successfully integrate it. They reach a point where they make the money serve their specific life's purpose rather than allowing their life's purpose to be dictated by the money.
Which is incredibly hard to do.
But you can only achieve that level of mastery if you actually know what your life's purpose is. And finding that out takes time. It takes friction. It takes the pause.
To help a young adult successfully navigate this pause, the text introduces a beautiful conceptual metaphor: the old man by the tree. Now, this isn't necessarily a literal old man sitting under an oak tree. It represents a vital mentor figure. This person could be a trusted advisor, an aunt, a former business partner of the founder.
Somebody with distance but knowledge.
Yes. This mentor knows everything about the family wealth. They know the exact size of the trust. But their job is not to teach the young adult about asset allocation or tax law. Instead, they act as a deeply empathetic sounding board. They sit alongside the recipient and encourage them to face the risks of building their own life.
When the young adult is terrified of failing at a new venture, The mentor is the compassionate presence that gives Froggy the courage to finally jump out of the luxurious pot of water. They act as the guardian of the pause, protecting the young person from the overwhelming demands of the family enterprise until they are truly ready.
But how do you even get a 20-something to that level of maturity where they would willingly accept a 10-year pause? That doesn't just happen overnight in the lawyer's office. That level of self-awareness has to start being built in early childhood. This leads us directly into the daily, gritty realities of parenting, managing allowances, and recognizing teachable moments.
Absolutely. Because passing down wealth isn't just a legal event, it's a series of daily interactions. And the authors draw a massive, incredibly important distinction between a transfer and a true gift.
Break that down for us.
A transfer is sterile. It is a purely mechanical action. You are simply moving assets from one entity's balance sheet to another's to minimize estate taxes. It lacks human spirit. And because it is sterile, it almost always leaves both the giver and the recipient feeling uneasy.
How so?
The giver feels like the recipient isn't grateful enough, and the recipient feels like there are massive unspoken strings attached to the money. This inevitably leads to resentment and entitlement. A true gift, on the other hand, carries spirit.
Right.
The intention behind a true gift is to actively promote the freedom, the growth, and the individuation of the recipient. The Roman philosopher Seneca wrote extensively on this, and he nailed it. As a gift is given, so shall it be received. If you give your child a house out of guilt because you work too much, they will receive it as a monument to your absence. If you give it as a manipulative tactic to keep them living in your city, they will receive it as a cage.
So how do you start shaping a child's healthy understanding of wealth from day one? Let's tackle one of the most universally terrifying questions a parent can ever get from a 6-year-old. You are driving them to school, and out of nowhere, the kid asks, "Are we rich?"
That is the ultimate trap question.
Parents usually panic. They freeze up. Or worse, they lie. They say, "Oh no, honey, we aren't rich. Jimmy's family down the street has a much bigger house. They are rich." But kids aren't dumb. They know you have plenty of food and nice cars. Lying to them just breeds insecurity and teaches them to evade the truth about money.
So what does the framework say to do?
The text suggests a highly effective, honest categorization. When your kid asks if you are rich, you look at them and explain that in this world, there are families who do not have enough to meet their basic needs. There are families who have just enough to get by comfortably. And our family is incredibly fortunate to have more than enough.
I love that framing, more than enough. It is factually true. It provides the child with a deep sense of psychological security without breeding arrogance. And most importantly, it naturally opens the door to a conversation about philanthropy. Once a child understands you have more than enough, the logical next question is, what do we do with the extra?
Exactly. And speaking of teaching moments, there's an anecdote in the text that perfectly illustrates how modern convenience is destroying our ability to teach kids about money.
Oh, the book fair story. I resonated with this so much.
Right. So a father takes his 7-year-old daughter to her private school's annual book fair. To make the line move faster, the school had an optional system where parents could just put a credit card on file with a preset limit, let's say $30.
Very convenient.
So the dad does this. The little girl happily wanders around the gymnasium, picks out a stack of books, walks up to the cashier, and hands them over. The cashier scans the books, types a few keys on a laptop, hands the books back, and says, "You're all set. No money changes hands. No card is swiped."
She didn't see any transaction.
Right. The little girl turns to her dad with a huge smile and proudly announces buying books is easy.
It's a cute moment, but the authors use it to highlight a massive systemic failure. By optimizing the transaction for extreme convenience and removing all the friction, the father completely robbed his daughter of a vital teachable moment.
He missed the chance entirely.
Think about what she missed. Because there was no physical cash, the father missed the chance to show her what $30 tangible actually looks and feels like. Because the cashier just typed on a laptop, he missed the chance to have his daughter do the mental math, realizing that 3 books at $9 each equals $27.
He missed explaining sales tax.
And crucially, because she never hit the limit, he missed the hardest but most important lesson, the friction of scarcity. He missed the moment where she tries to buy a 4th book and he has to look at her and say, "No, the money is gone, you have to put one back."
That friction is absolutely necessary for learning. If you healed your kids from financial friction, they will be utterly defenseless when they hit the real world. And this directly applies to the most contentious topic in wealthy households: Allowances.
Allowance is your battleground.
The debates families have over allowances are endless. Should it be tied to chores? Should it be given freely? But the text cuts through the noise with a clear philosophy. An allowance is not a salary for doing the dishes. It is not an entitlement just for existing. An allowance is purely a pedagogical tool. It is a teaching mechanism.
Precisely. By viewing it as a teaching tool, you shift the focus away from what the child did to get the money, and you place the focus entirely on what the child plans to do with the money.
So how do you structure it?
The authors highly recommend the 3 buckets method. When you give the allowance, it is physically or digitally divided into 3 equal parts. 1/3 goes into a spending bucket for immediate gratification like candy or toys. 1/3 goes into a saving bucket, teaching them long-term planning for a bigger purchase like a bicycle. And 1/3 goes into a philanthropy bucket to be given away to a cause they choose.
This simple system actively teaches delayed gratification, capital allocation, and family values all at the exact same time. But the system only works if you enforce the absolute, most crucial, unbreakable rule about allowances. You cannot bail them out.
Never bail them out.
Let's say you give your 12-year-old their monthly allowance on the 1st of the month. On the 2nd of the month, they go to the mall and completely blow their entire spending bucket on a ridiculously overpriced pair of shoes. For the next 29 days, they are broke. When they ask for $10 to go to the movies with their friends on the weekend, you have to look them in the eye and say, "I'm sorry, you chose the shoes. You have no money."
It is agonizing as a parent to watch your kid miss out. But delay of gratification, enforced by real consequences, is the greatest teacher on earth.
Yeah.
You have to let them fail safely when the stakes are just $20 at the mall, so they don't fail catastrophically later when the stakes are a $2 million business loan.
If you cave in and bail them out, you aren't being nice. You are actively teaching them a highly destructive lesson. There are no real consequences for my financial mismanagement because a higher power will always rescue me.
That mindset is the exact accelerant for the entropy we talked about earlier. And speaking of things that can either accelerate a family's entropy or preserve its wealth, we need to pivot and talk about the architecture that holds all this together.
Yeah.
The legal and trust structures.
Yes, the Trust-scape. This is where the statistics get genuinely terrifying. If we look at families that survive to the 3rd generation, over 90% of their financial assets are typically locked up in what the authors call the trust wave. The money is heavily institutionalized. And yet, despite being the primary vehicle for generational wealth, surveys show that over 80% of beneficiaries view their trusts as an absolute burden, not a blessing.
Just sit with that failure rate for a second. Over 80% view a massive financial gift as a burden. Why is that? It's because the traditional trust wave is incredibly, ruthlessly effective at preserving the financial capital. It shields the money from taxes, from lawsuits, from bad investments, but in doing so, it acts as a deadening weight on the family's qualitative capital.
It crushes the human element.
It breeds massive confusion, deep resentment, and this suffocating feeling among the younger generation that they are being micromanaged and controlled from the grave by a grandfather they never met.
Before we go further, let's just make sure we all understand the basic jargon here, because the legal world makes this intentionally confusing. At its core, what is a trust? You have 3 main players. First, you have the grantor. That's the person who made the money and created the trust. Then you have the trustee. This is the person or the bank who is legally in charge of holding and managing the money. And finally, you have the beneficiary. That's the person who actually gets to receive the money or the benefits from the trust.
The authors demand a complete vocabulary shift in how we view these 3 players. We have to stop thinking of a trust as primarily a stack of legal documents, a receptacle for holding assets, or a clever tax avoidance strategy. In reality, and even under the law, a trust is fundamentally a relationship between human beings.
To highlight the relational nature of this, the authors coined the term Trust-scape to describe the ecosystem of people involved. Let's look at the traditional Trust-scape. In this old model, the power dynamics are entirely top-down. At the very top, you have the institutional trustees, the big banks, and the lawyers. They hold all the power and they speak in jargon.
All right, they run the show.
Hovering somewhere above them is a mysterious legal figure called a trust protector who has the power to fire the trustee but rarely talks to anyone.
Oh.
And sitting at the very bottom of this hierarchy, feeling completely disempowered, infantilized, and out of the loop, is the beneficiary.
So the text proposes a radical systemic redesign, the Humane Trust-scape. In this new model, you take that hierarchical map and you flip it completely on its side. You place the beneficiary right in the dead center of the ecosystem.
They are the focus.
The ultimate goal of the Humane Trust-scape is to achieve a state of control without ownership. The beneficiary doesn't legally own the assets, which is good because that protects the money from their creditors or from a bad divorce. But they still feel a profound sense of agency and involvement in how the trust affects their life.
To actually create that agency and operationalize the Humane Trust-scape, the authors introduced two highly functional committees that surround the beneficiary. First, you establish a distribution committee.
And what does that do?
This is a person or a small group whose sole job is to advise the formal trustee on when and how to give out money. Instead of a faceless banker making the call, the distribution committee takes the time to deeply know the beneficiary. They understand the beneficiary's struggles, their ambitions, and what will genuinely help them flourish, and then they advise the trustee accordingly.
Second, you establish a beneficiary advisory board.
I absolutely love this concept. The Beneficiary Advisory Board has zero legal power over the money. They serve only the beneficiary. It's like a personal board of directors. Their job is to help the young adult actively integrate the reality of the trust into their broader life. They offer career mentoring, financial education, or advice on how to handle friends who ask for loans.
And who runs it?
The beneficiary gets to decide when this board meets, and ideally, they pay the board members out of their own trust distributions, which gives the beneficiary the ultimate power of being the boss.
And then we return to that mysterious trust protector role we mentioned earlier. In the Humane Trust-scape, this role is totally reimagined. Instead of acting as a super fiduciary with arbitrary legal power who only cares about the math, they become a trust champion.
A champion, I like that.
They act as a mediator. They only step in if they are specifically requested by the beneficiary or the trustee to help resolve a communication breakdown or a dispute. And the authors make a fascinating point. This mediation role is perfectly suited for a specific, respected group within the family structure itself, the elders.
Yes, the elders. And the text is very careful to define what an elder is, because an elder isn't just someone who happens to have lived past the age of 70. Age does not guarantee wisdom. The text defines a true elder by their possession of the 4 Ds.
First is discernment, the intellectual ability to sift through complex emotional family issues and find the truth without jumping to knee-jerk conclusions.
Second is discretion, the emotional maturity to know exactly when to listen quietly and when it is necessary to speak up.
Third is discipline, a deep internal control that allows them to consistently model the family's core values rather than just preaching them.
And fourth is discovery. This is the most crucial one. A true elder maintains a beginner's mind. They are always curious, and they are willing to learn from a 20-year-old just as much as they are willing to teach one.
Families that cultivate these elders have a massive competitive advantage. These elders are the ones who recount the family history, they organically mediate the disputes between cousins, and they conduct the family rituals that build legacy capital.
The text even suggests formalizing this by creating a wisdom council within the family governance structure. Think of it as the judicial branch of the family enterprise. When the family business is going through a chaotic merger, or 2 siblings are at war over a beach house, the wisdom council steps in.
They don't look at the legal contracts, they look at the human relationships.
Exactly. They remind the warring parties of their shared heritage and help them navigate back to the family's core mission. Which brings us to a really poignant, almost humbling realization in the text. You can hire the best lawyers in the world. You can set up the most brilliant, perfectly optimized Humane Trust-scape. You can have a wisdom council and a distribution committee, and you can spend a weekend drafting a beautiful laminated family mission statement.
Right.
But the authors issue a massive warning. Good governance is not the ultimate goal. Governance is merely a byproduct of good character.
That is the crux of the entire book. If we look back through history, law and rigid societal custom used to be the primary forces shaping family character. 100 years ago, wealthy families were bound by strict unspoken customs regarding education, military service, charitable giving, and public behavior. If you violated those customs, you were ostracized.
Those rigid societal structures largely evaporated after the social and cultural revolutions of the 1960s and 70s. Today, affluent families have unparalleled freedom. But the terrifying flip side of that freedom is that they are entirely on their own to invent a moral system to keep themselves together.
That is exactly why intentional family meetings, shared values, and the careful cultivation of qualitative capital are non-negotiable now. You can't rely on society to give your kids character. You have to build it yourself.
The text includes a proverb that I wrote down immediately. If you are planning for the decade, plant trees. If you are planning for the centuries, grow men and women. You have to focus obsessively on the character development of the individuals.
And if we want to talk about where character is tested most intensely, we have to talk about marriage. Specifically, navigating a marriage when there is a massive elephant in the room fiscal difference between the two spouses. Let's say one partner comes from a family with a $100 million enterprise, and the other partner comes from a middle-class family with student debt.
That's a huge dynamic shift.
Navigating that inequality without destroying the marital bond is one of the hardest challenges in the realm of family wealth.
The authors offer two absolute cues for surviving and thriving in a marriage with that kind of fiscal inequality. First, the marriage must be built on a bedrock foundation of positive regard and genuine empathy for the other person's background. Second, and this is the tricky part, they have to ensure that each party feels entirely self-sufficient, competent, and valued, regardless of whose bank account has more zeros. The partner without the wealth cannot be made to feel like an employee or a dependent.
To actually operationalize that and make it work in the real world, the authors recommend a specific framework developed by Charles Collier. It's a 3-step process designed for spouses who are facing complex, highly emotional wealth decisions, like whether to sign a prenup or how to fund their kids' education.
So what's step one?
Step 1 is clarification. Both spouses sit down in separate rooms and write out what they actually believe and what they genuinely want. The key here is brutal honesty. You cannot edit yourself based on what you think your partner wants to hear or what you think your wealthy in-laws expect.
Step 2 is sharing. They come together and share their written clarity. But there's a strict rule. One person speaks and the other person listens without interrupting. You cannot argue. You can only ask clarifying questions to ensure you deeply understand their perspective.
Step 3 is deciding. Only after both people feel entirely heard and understood do they attempt to negotiate and decide together what the path forward is.
The book drops a quote during this section that hit me like a ton of bricks. The greatest enemy to communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Ouch. That is so true.
How often do we argue with a spouse or a business partner, and we walk away thinking we communicated our point, but in reality, we just talked at them while they planned their rebuttal? You have to actually listen. And this focus on deep, empathetic connection naturally bleeds into another massive area where character is forged: our friendships and how we define the meaning of our daily work.
This raises an important question about how we fundamentally define those things, especially when money complicates them. Let's look at friendship first. Members of the rising generation, the kids who grow up with trust funds, often struggle with deep paranoia regarding friendships. They're constantly wondering, does this person actually like me for who I am, or do they just like the fact that I can pay for dinner and get them onto my family's boat?
To solve this, the text draws on the philosophy of Aristotle, who brilliantly categorized friends into 3 distinct types. First, you have friends of utility. These are entirely transactional relationships. Your banker, your accountant, the guy who fixes your car. You are friendly, but the relationship exists because you provide utility to each other.
Second, you have friends of pleasure. These are the people you play golf with, the people you see at parties. The relationship is based on shared enjoyment of an activity, but it doesn't run deep.
And third, the rarest and most important kind: friends of virtue. Friends of virtue are the people who look at your character, see your potential, and actively encourage you to be as excellent as possible. They're the ones who will call you out when you're being lazy and who truly, genuinely delight in your success without a hint of jealousy.
For the young adult paralyzed by wealth paranoia, the advice from the authors is remarkably simple but incredibly difficult to execute. Stop worrying about everyone else's motives. Focus intensely on being a friend of virtue yourself, and intentionally seek out people who affirm your strengths and challenge your weaknesses.
Yeah.
If you focus on virtue, the transactional people will naturally fall away.
And that pursuit of excellence brings us to the final piece of the puzzle: work. For a normal person, the purpose of work is obvious. You work to pay the rent and buy groceries. But for someone who possesses complete financial freedom, someone who never needs to work a day in their life for economic survival, what is the actual point of working? Why not just sit on a beach for 50 years?
Positive psychology provides the answer. They define meaningful work not as paid corporate labor, but as the act of applying your unique signature strengths and virtues in the service of something much larger than yourself. Work doesn't have to mean sitting in a cubicle. Meaningful work could be raising well-adjusted children. It could be caring for elderly family members. It could be dedicating 40 hours a week to running a local charity or mastering an art form.
Aristotle explored this exact concept by trying to define the ultimate purpose of a human being. To explain it, he used the example of a lyre player, someone who plays a harp-like instrument. He said, okay, the function of a lyre player is simply to play the instrument, but the function of a serious, dedicated lyre player is to play it exceedingly well, striving for absolute excellence with every note.
He applied that to humanity. The human work is an activity of the soul in accordance with excellence. You don't work just to produce a widget. You work to refine your own soul. And interestingly, Aristotle noted that playing the lyre at that level is actually a form of deep play. It is a pursuit done entirely for its own sake, not for a paycheck.
The philosopher Pythagoras offered an amazing metaphor to capture this exact dynamic. He compared the entirety of human life to the ancient Olympic Games. He said, if you look at the stadium, there are 3 distinct types of people present. First, you have the contestants down on the field. They are sweating, bleeding, and fighting, desperately seeking honor, fame, and victory.
Second, you have the vendors walking up and down the stands. They don't care about the game. They are just there seeking money and profit from the crowd.
And third, you have the spectators. They aren't fighting for fame, and they aren't hustling for coin. They are sitting in the stands simply to observe, to find deep pleasure in watching the beauty of the game unfold, seeking truth, understanding, and perspective.
I love that so much. It forces you to stop and ask yourself, who are you in the stadium of your own life right now? Are you the contestant, completely consumed by the desperate need to win and prove yourself? Are you the vendor, viewing every single human interaction as a transactional opportunity to make a buck? Or are you the spectator, able to step back, appreciate the beauty of the game, and find meaning beyond the hustle?
It is a profound philosophical mirror to hold up to yourself, and it is a vital question for anyone to weigh, but especially for someone who has the ultimate financial freedom to freely choose any of those 3 roles without fear of starvation. So what does this all mean? Let's try to synthesize this incredible, sprawling journey we've been on.
We covered a lot of ground today.
We started in a hallway with a terrified mother haunted by the Great Depression, and we looked at a proverb about rice paddies. We've navigated the destructive gravity of the black hole, the necessity of the 10-year pause, the architecture of humane trust-scapes, and the philosophy of the Olympic Games. The core, undeniable truth of this entire deep dive is that wealth is not money. Wealth is well-being.
Financial capital is just the tool in your belt.
The actual durable currency that preserves a family for 150 years, the soil that allows the copper beech tree to reach its full, magnificent canopy, is communication, character, and the successful, lifelong individuation of every single family member.
It all comes back to the human element. Whether you're dealing with a 12-year-old blowing their allowance on shoes, a 25-year-old paralyzed by the realization of a trust fund, or an 80-year-old founder terrified to let go of the reins of their business, the answer is always found in the qualitative capital.
It is about intentionally building a family of affinity, not just relying on blood genetics. It's about treating legal trusts as living human relationships rather than just tax shelters. It's about planting the tree. I want to leave you with one final thought that completely recontextualized this entire book for me. We've spent the last hour talking heavily about ultra-wealthy families, multi-million-dollar trust funds, and complex family offices.
But there is a broader application.
Exactly. Think about the logical conclusion of everything we just learned. If a true family is built on affinity and shared values, not just blood genetics, and if true wealth is defined by human connection, legacy, communication, and character, rather than the number of zeros in a bank account,
Then everyone applies.
then every single one of you listening to this right now is currently the founder of your own family enterprise. You do not need a massive trust fund to suffer the consequences of poor character. And you certainly do not need millions of dollars to reap the massive benefits of writing a family mission statement, or cultivating friends of virtue, or establishing an allowance system that teaches your kids resilience.
Think about the copper beech tree you are planting today with your friends, your spouses, and your children. What are the stories that your family's wisdom council will tell about you 3 generations from now?
That is the only real legacy you have. The qualitative capital you invest your time in today is the only thing that has a chance of surviving the centuries. Keep learning, keep questioning, and enjoy the journey of your own deep dive into life. We'll see you next time.